Welcome to a codeless demo. In this demo, we're going to be building a bookings calendar app. This can be used by any business that takes bookings or appointments from customers. The idea would be that a customer would be able to go online, look at a list of available days and times, select a time slot, book it, and on the merchant or business owner's side, they should be able to see a new booking that's created on a nice calendar view. So let's get started. I'm using a completely blank app on Bubble, and this is Bubble's free tier plan. So this won't cost you anything to go in and play around and try and replicate it. Let's get started. So I want two major views for this app. That would be one for a customer view, where the customers can actually go in and look at the available times and dates and do the booking. And the second view would just be for the business owner, and that's where they'd be able to see a calendar, sort of like your Google Calendar on your phone, where you can see a list of your appointments or bookings or meetings, whatever it may be. So we're going to add two new pages. The first page is going to be for the customer view. I'm going to call it customer bookings. And the second page is going to be for the business owner's view. I'm going to call it bookings calendar. And you can create those. And let's go into customer bookings first. I think this is a really good example to familiarize yourself with Bubble. I would call this maybe an intermediate build. It's not totally basic and it's not very advanced. So this would assume that you have some working knowledge of Bubble and have used it before. If you haven't already, then check out the Bubbles Basics video first before you watch this. For this build, we're going to be using two plugins, and it's going to be these two: the calendar tool, and that's by Brown Fox, and the full calendar, which is a Bubble made plugin. You can find these in the plugins. Go to add plugins, just search the names and you'll see the relevant icons where you can install these. If we go back to design, I think I'm going to start off with the calendar itself, and for that I'm going to need a repeating group, which I can lay down somewhere in the middle of my page. The type of content here is going to be date, as it's a calendar, and the number of rows I want would be 7, and the number of columns 7 as well. 7 columns because 7 days of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that should be good for our repeating group for now. We don't actually have a data source at the moment because we have no data at the moment. This is just the initial framework of the calendar. And next we would need some headings for this calendar, which would be our days of the week. And I'm going to use text boxes for those. And I want it roughly the same size as my calendar cells, and I can just copy and paste 7 of these. Okay, there we go. These are going to be our days of the week, and we can just go in and label them. Actually, I'm going to start the week off with a Sunday. Would be a better idea. And end with a Saturday, as that's the general format of most calendars you would see. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to change the format of this repeating group a little bit. Maybe give it a border, so you can go to remove style. Do I want separations? So these separations are these grid lines you see here. You can change these. You have a few options: dotted, dashed. Let's go for dashed. And if you look down here, you've got a selection of border styles. I'll do solid and give it a width of 2, or a roundness of 20, and a width of 2. There we go. Now we've got something resembling the outline of a calendar with no data or no dates inside it. To get these, we're going to use the calendar tool. So you'll find under visual elements, if you've installed the calendar tool plugin already, it should appear here. And we can just pop this down somewhere on our page. So this is a blank element. It's not going to show up in your user view or in your previews, but it just has to exist somewhere in the page. The size of it doesn't matter either. It can be really tiny. And it wants some information from us here. So first of all, it's asking for a month date, basically a day of the week, and a time date, which is some sort of variable to describe time. This is some sort of variable to describe the day. These don't actually exist at this point. So what we're going to have to do is somehow get this information into Bubble. And the most efficient way to do that is to use a custom state. So a custom state is a way of saving information on a page that doesn't actually get written to your database. This is just a more efficient way to call data that's going to be changing quite frequently on your page, where the application doesn't have to make a call to the database, retrieve the data, and bring it back up and display it. So we can use custom states in this case, and those work very nicely. So if you go onto your main page, which are customer bookings, you'll see this little C reference, or you'll see this little I icon up here in the header. And it's the element inspector, as you see, and we've got an option here to create a new custom state. So the state name, as we saw in the calendar tool, it's looking for a date. So date of the month, and the state type here will be date. And the next one will be time. And the state type here would also be date. So in Bubble, a time is also a date. It's just a subset or a part of a date. If we look at our taskbar down here, we can see this is a full date. So the full date right now is the 9th of March 2021, and it's 9:11 p.m. In Bubble, this would be a full date. So we're going to use the full date as defined here, and then just extract the day of the month, as well as the time. And there's easy ways to extract this information from that full date, as I'll show you now. I just want to centralize this a bit. There we go. Get that formatting looking a little bit neater. Okay, that's fine. So let's go back to our calendar tool, and we hit it up here somewhere. The easier way would be to go to this drop down menu here, which where you can search for an element, and you can see your calendar tool there. So month date we can define as customer bookings date month, or date month as I've called it, and time would be customer bookings time. That really doesn't matter. All these variable names are changeable, and whatever you tell Bubble it's called, Bubble doesn't care. So there we go. We've got our calendar tool pretty much set up. Oh, I missed a field here which I need to explain. So if we look at our calendar tool, it shows our time interval here. So this would basically be the duration of each booking or appointment would be 60 minutes. And this we can change. We can even change this to a dynamic expression where we can ask the business owner to put in their own time interval here. Perhaps their bookings are 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours. So this can be a variable option, but let's leave it at 60 minutes now for simplicity. The next thing we'd have to do is actually put in our data source for the repeating group date, and this would be calendar tool A's list of dates. Cool. When you see an expression turn blue in Bubble, it means it may basically make sense in Bubble syntax language. If it's red, it's not going to work, and you'll get an error popping up over here in your header. So now the next step would be to actually get our date of the month into these little cells, and we can use a text box for this. So we can go to Visual Elements, Text, create a text box in the cell. So as you saw now, the way this repeating group works is you just edit the top left cell or the top cell if you have a single column, and it pre-populates everything else in this cell. And let's see how that would work. So what we want here would be the current dates, the current cell's date. But as I said before, in Bubble, a full date is this entire expression. So we want to format that, and we've got a list of format types. But as you can see here, there's no format type for just 9, which is what we're interested in displaying, or just the date of that day. So we can go to custom, and we've got a few custom formats that Bubble allows, and we can just put in a single D. So we want the date to be displayed in a single character. So if we preview this at this stage, we're not going to see anything in this repeating group. Let's have a look. As you can see, we just have a blank repeating group with the frame that we created. The reason for this is we haven't yet defined our custom states. So if we look at our custom states, we have date month, which is defined as it's supposed to be a date, but we haven't told it what date exactly. So to do this, we can use a workflow. So if we go down, one tab down from design, you've got workflows, and you can see it should be blank. And you can click here to add an event. An event is something that occurs in the app, like a button is clicked, or a user is logged in, or an element is clicked, an icon is clicked, or a page is loaded. So page is loaded is what we're interested in now, because we want to attribute basically a reference point of date as soon as the page is loaded. And then we can click here to add an action, and we go to element actions, set state. Our element would be the page we're working on, which is customer bookings, and the custom state we're interested in setting is date month, and the value for this we can choose current date and time. So we're basically telling this date month, the state date month. So now we've given our custom state a reference, as in current date time. So now it knows, our calendar knows, or calendar tool A knows that it's going to be displaying a date which is referenced to today's date. We can preview this again. And here we see we have some date information. If I open up my Windows calendar, we can see the calendar starts on the 28th, it's a Sunday, and it continues on. Here we may actually not need 7 rows. Let's go for 6. Okay. Okay, so now we've got the basis of a calendar. We need a bit more information on this calendar for the user to see, such as what month they're looking at, and we can add that as a heading somewhere over here. We also need a way for the user to select a month, go forward a month, go back a month. They might want to book a couple months in advance. So let's use a text box here, and we can put that somewhere over here. This might be a little big. And we can use this text box. And our content for this text box is we're going to insert dynamic data. And that's going to be customer bookings, date, month, formatted as. So we're getting the month from the custom state, which we initially referenced to today's date. And you see there's no option again for just the month. We just want to see March. So we can go to custom and put in MMMM. So in 4 characters, basically show the month, just the month displayed in 4 characters. In that format. So now we should have March as a heading to this calendar. Let's look at our preview again. Cool. And now we've got March up here, very small and off center. So let's put a few finishing touches on that. I can remove the body style and increase the size of this text. Let's go for 24. I want it to be bold. I want it to be centralized. And we can select a color for this, maybe navy, and even change the text format or the font. This font bar takes some time to load up sometimes, especially if you've had your browser open for a long time. It's good to maybe close your browser every now and then. Okay, but there we go. Here's a more bold font. And if we preview that formatting change, hopefully it looks a bit better. Cool, then we see March up there, nice and bold. The next thing I wanted to do is get rid of this ugly scroll bar. So a few finishing touches on the repeating group. If you just double click on the repeating group itself, we've got layout style and you've got a few options here. Let's go for full list. So full list will display all the content by expanding the repeating group instead of putting a scroll bar so you can scroll through the repeating group. And the next thing I want to do is format the numbers within the calendar. So I want to center that horizontally, center vertically. As for the font, I'm going to remove the style here and make that bold, centrally aligned, and center the text vertically. So that should start looking a bit better now. Maybe let's make the text slightly bigger so it fills the space better. And let's give it a border. Maybe a solid border. Roundness, let's go for 60. So it's a nice round button, and it's clear that this can be clicked on. Just want to center that nicely in the cell. Cool, and that looks good to me. I actually want to remove these separations now that the numbers have a border. So if you go back to your repeating group, the separato will be none. And hopefully that looks a bit better and more presentable. There we go, that actually looks much better. Yeah, I like the look of that. The numbers sit nicely within the borders. The day headings are a bit off, not too well aligned here, but we can change that. Just moving these along so they're nice and centered on the page. I will later put these into a group, so I can move all these day headings together and treat them as one element, treat them as a single element. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that for these purposes. And now we've got something that looks kind of like a calendar. The next step here would be to create a list of times that the customer can select from. So the idea would be they come in here, select a date, and you've got a pop-up with a list of times. I'm going to put them down here, and I'm going to make that another repeating group. There we go. And the type of content here would be date as well. And the data source would be calendar tool A's list of times. Okay, as for columns, I maybe want 5 options. Now let's go for 4 options for time on a single column and 4 rows. And I don't want scrolling here, I want this to be a full list. And I want to put in a instruction for the user or for the potential customer. And I'm going to say here, select a time. Later we're going to add conditions to these so they only show up once you've selected a date. But let's just leave that as is for now. Then in our repeating group itself, we're going to add a text box. And this text box is going to be similar to this text box in the calendar, but it's going to be formatted for time. So it's going to be current cells. So that's going to be current cells date formatted as format type. In this case, we do have a few time format types. So we can either make it 24-hour time or standard 12-hour time with the AM or PM. I think let's do that. And let's change the format of these time cells. So I'm going to remove the formatting, just make it bold, centralized, center the text vertically, and let's give this a border style as well. Solid, a roundness of 20. So now we've got more oval-like bubbles, and a width of 1 should be good. So now at this stage we need to tell this time cell when exactly to populate and what to populate, as this isn't linked to any sort of action at the moment. So the idea is the user would come in, select a date, and on that particular date you would see a list of available times. So if we double click on our top left cell here, we can start edit workflow, and we're going to use a workflow to say when the text current cell's date is clicked, meaning the text, one of the dates in the calendar are clicked, we need some sort of action to populate the times. So we go down to element actions, set state. Element is the page that we're working on now, customer bookings. Set state of time, and the value would be current sales date. So let's have a look now at our preview. There we go. Now hopefully when we click something, yay, we get a list of times. And as you can see, this is a list from 12 a.m. to 11 p.m. Obviously no one works these hours, I hope. That's every hour in the day. So later on, when we're designing the business's side or the business owner's side of the app or the business owner's screen, we're going to give them a function or functionality to enter their available times or their business times, their open close times. But for now, we have the basic framework of the customer side. So we've got a basic view of how the calendar is going to look and work. The next step would be to build the side of the calendar, which would be the bookings calendar page, as well as the user login. Also, we'll need to save these bookings to the database to display them on the customer page. And we'll also need to be able to set available times for the business owner. So I'll complete this in part 2. Thanks for watching part 1. I hope you learned something, and I hope this is interesting. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Thank you.